Hey guys, this is Heen. When I started making videos a few weeks back, it kind of just came out of the blue, so I wanted to do one on myself and how I ended up deciding to make content. I guess you can think of this as a late introduction to myself and the channel. Like most guys who were into video games at the time, I grew up watching the beginning and the boom of esports in Korea, which was basically Starcraft. And StarCraft was insanely popular, but even so, I remember the first time watching it, it was fascinating that something so relatable was being shown on TV. This wasn't some fictional cartoon show. This felt so real. It was my favorite thing to do after school, and unlike traditional sports, this was also completely fresh. There was no YouTube or Twitch back then, so this was mind-blowing. People bought game magazines to learn build orders and stuff. And when people look back now, they think it's hilarious that the first generation StarCraft players wore such ridiculous outfits. But as far as I can recall, these guys were the bosses to look up to. They were getting paid to play everyone's favorite game on TV. Fast forward a few years, I was in college and I was struggling to balance school with Dota. These were the Dota 1 days, so there was no prospect of becoming a professional player. I just had so much fun playing it with my friends that I couldn't help myself. I didn't even think there was the tiniest chance that Dota would eventually become my career. As each year passed, I felt more and more pressure to snap out of it and do real life things like everyone else. Graduate, serve in the military, get a job. So finally, I did the first two. I somehow graduated and enlisted in the military. I was both excited and sad because around the time I enlisted, Valve announced that they were making Dota 2. I was excited that a company like Valve remaking Dota could mean that Dota might become huge, not in a sense of popularity since it was already really big, but that it might mark the next generation in competitive gaming. And of course, I was sad because I would completely miss out on the first 2 years of it, on top of military service just being a miserable experience. When I first thought about doing this video, I didn't want to just ramble on about my life. It's not like I'm Forrest Gump or anything, but when I look back at the journey I've made, it's kind of necessary so that I can connect the dots and see the bigger picture of how I ended up where I am. And in doing so, I realized that I've been incredibly lucky in hindsight. Luck is something that is out of your control or something that you can't account for. So, for example, the birth of Dota 2 was lucky from my perspective. I spent thousands of hours on this stupid custom map, and I probably would have gotten a PhD if I spent that much time on school instead. But during this time, it wasn't as if I was banking on the fact that it was going to become the major esports title it is today. I just chose to play it because it was addictively fun to play with my roomies, and by sheer fortune, Dota 2 came about and it was potentially very profitable. Alright, so Dota 2 came out, big deal. It's not like I'm the one playing at TI. I'm stuck in some military base in the middle of nowhere anyway. After what seems like an eternity, I'm almost done with my service. I barely played any Dota during those 2 years, so I was extremely rusty. But luckily for me, there was somewhat of a Korean scene and March was willing to save me a spot on a new roster based on good faith from our short history of playing together. Until that point, I was worrying about which career path to choose from when I returned to the real world. I remember my commanding officer was telling me all the time that I have to groom myself so I could get into a huge company like Samsung, which didn't seem very appealing even back then. And now, a few months away from completing my service, I had an opportunity to give a shot at something I only dreamt of. The fact that there was even a sponsor willing to provide housing, or that there would be a league in a Dota minority country like Korea, was all a streak of good luck. We even made it to our first international LAN by qualifying to Star Ladder through a Korea-only qualifier. I mean, let's be real. This kind of affirmative action would have caused an outrage on social media by today's standard. Maybe it did back then, but I didn't even know about Reddit or Twitter at the time. Despite all the clowniness of the early Korean Dota days, we were able to improve until we could make it to TI fair and square. Fast forward another 2 years, and I left MVP because I eventually lost motivation to continue playing. I won't get into the details, but that's pretty much how it was in a nutshell. At this point, I'm really wondering if I'm done with Dota and what line of work would interest me. I'm pretty much unemployed and tried casting games for a short while. I guess the idea of leaving Dota behind struck me as a bitter reality. A few weeks later, I get contacted by Team Liquid. They're looking for a coach. I mean, why would Liquid contact me of all people? Well, as it turns out, I played with Jerix in TI5, and Blitz, who was Liquid's coach at the time, also spent about a year living in Korea as one of our rival opponents. These are things that were completely unforeseen to me. I sure as hell didn't have any experience coaching, but a few days later, I packed my stuff and I'm headed to the first epicenter as a tryout coach, and so begins my latest chapter in Dota. During all this time, I was too busy competing that I didn't ever take the time to step back and look at how one thing led to another, and realize that I've been lucky in a sense that not all of my success came from hard work. I was at the right place at the right time at key moments of my career, and I went from being that kid fascinated by seeing Starcraft on TV to someone who took playing for millions of dollars for granted. So the reason I started making content is because I've experienced something very special in large thanks to forces out of my control. It's not like I ever had a crazy amount of willpower to go big or go home. And I know there are people out there who, at the moment, can only wonder what that's been like. For example, if I were to go back in time and meet my younger self, and he were to ask what lies ahead,
You're not gonna believe what I'm about to tell you.
No, I'm not.
I'd give him a thumbs up for playing Dota all day, and I'd tell him that he would not only pursue a career in Dota, but eventually win a TI. He'd first ask me what a TI is, and then tell me to stop being sarcastic with him. I imagine the way things turned out for a lot of people in the scene is in similar light, and will be in the future as well, because as far as I know, most people ended up as players today in the teams they're in without having it all planned out from the beginning. Even today, my normal friends ask me about all the different aspects of my career. To them, I'm the guy who got to do something fun for a living. I'm always introduced as that pro gamer guy because even though it's been a while since I retired as a player, the idea of it is still exciting to other people as it was for me as a kid. The point of this video obviously isn't that you have to be lucky to get what you want, but rather that it's hard to perceive the things you can't control until they already take place. And then you need the time and space to take a step back and start appreciating how many different turns could have led to completely different outcomes. No matter what it is you're chasing, opportunities will come by sooner or later, and it's up to you to make the best out of them. I hope this video has given you a better idea of who I am and some context as to what drives me to make content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.